Imagine turning on your radio to catch the evening news, only to hear the announcer reading tomorrow's weather report. Would you grab an umbrella? Or wonder if you were losing your mind? This is the story of a man who found the answer to that question. And what he discovered was far worse than madness. Arthur Winslow was a watchmaker, a quiet man in a quiet town. The kind of person you'd walk past on the sidewalk without a second glance. He had no family to speak of, no close friends, just the steady company of broken things waiting to be fixed. He ran a small repair shop on Elm Street, a narrow storefront squeezed between a barber shop and a hardware store. The sign above the door read, "Winslow's Watch Repair," in faded gold letters that hadn't been retouched in years. Inside, the shop was filled with the sound of ticking. Hundreds of clocks and watches lined the walls and covered every surface, each marking time in its own way, all slightly out of sync with one another. It created a strange, constant rhythm, like the heartbeat of something not quite alive. Arthur never seemed to notice. To him, it was simply the sound of work waiting to be done. Arthur worked late most nights. He preferred the company of broken mechanisms to people. There was a logic to gears and springs that the world outside his door never seemed to offer. A watch could be understood. A watch could be fixed. People were a different matter entirely. One evening, among a pile of items left for repair, a mantel clock, a music box with a stuck cylinder, a woman's brooch watch, he found something unexpected. An old tube radio, a Zenith, maybe a 47 or 48 model. The wooden cabinet was scratched and worn, but the tubes inside still glowed a warm amber when he plugged it in. He turned the dial. Static hissed through the small speaker, thin and crackling like the sound of a fire dying out, and then a voice broke through. A news announcer, calm, professional, reading the local evening bulletin. Traffic on Route 9, weather for the morning, nothing unusual. Arthur smiled faintly and went back to work, grateful for once, for the company. It was nearly midnight when something changed. Arthur had been repairing a pocket watch, a delicate piece with a cracked balance spring, when the announcer's voice returned. But this time the broadcast was different. The man was reading the results of a horse race, the Belmont Stakes qualifier. Arthur recognized the names of the horses, but the race wasn't scheduled until tomorrow afternoon. Arthur chuckled to himself. A programming error, he thought. Someone at the station had mixed up the tapes, played tomorrow's segment instead of tonight's. It happened. He wrote down the winning horse's name on a scrap of paper just as a joke to himself, folded it, tucked it under his desk lamp, and went home. The next afternoon, the horse won. The exact horse, the exact margin of victory. Arthur stood in the doorway of his shop, holding the newspaper open with both hands, reading the results 3 times, then a 4th. His handwriting on the scrap of paper matched the headline perfectly. He put the newspaper down. He did not smile. That night, Arthur stayed late again. He turned the radio on at the same time, 11:58. The dial glowed amber in the darkened shop. The static returned. And then, precisely at midnight, the voice. This time, the announcer reported a fire, a bakery on Birch Street, 2 blocks from Arthur's shop. The broadcast described the damage in clinical detail: windows blown out by the pressure, flour dust in the air igniting in a chain reaction, structural collapse of the east wall. No casualties, but the building was a total loss. Arthur grabbed his coat and walked out into the cold. 2 blocks, Birch Street. The bakery was there, intact, dark, closed for the night. The display window showed a row of bread loaves and a hand-lettered sign. Fresh rolls daily, not a flame in sight, not a crack in the glass. He went home confused, but the next morning, he was awakened by sirens. The bakery on Birch Street was engulfed in flames, exactly as described. Every detail, the windows, the flour dust, the east wall. No casualties. 24 hours. The radio was exactly 24 hours ahead. From that night on, Arthur listened every evening at midnight, and every broadcast, without exception, came true precisely 24 hours later. He began to take notes. Careful, methodical notes in a small leather notebook he kept beside the radio. Weather forecasts that were always right. Traffic accidents he could now avoid. A burst pipe on Main Street that he warned the shopkeeper about, just in time. Arthur told no one how he knew, and no one thought to ask. In a small town, a man who is right about the weather is simply considered observant. After a week of listening, a week of confirmed predictions, Arthur decided to look inside the radio. He was a repairman, after all. If there was an explanation, a rational, mechanical explanation, it would be in the components. He removed the back panel carefully and examined each piece. 4 standard vacuum tubes, glowing their usual warm amber, a transformer, capacitors, wiring that looked original to the 1940s. Everything appeared correct, except for one thing. One of the tubes was not like the others. It was the same size, the same shape, but it emitted a faint blue glow instead of amber. There were no manufacturer markings anywhere on the glass, no serial number, no stamp. And when Arthur reached in to touch it, it was cold, completely cold. Every other tube in that radio was hot enough to burn skin. This one felt like it had been sitting in a freezer. Arthur pulled his hand back slowly. He stared at the tube for a long time, the blue light reflecting in his glasses. Then he put the panel back on. He tightened every screw. He didn't understand how it worked. He wasn't sure he wanted to, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had an advantage that no one else in the world possessed, and he intended to use it. Over the following days, Arthur's life changed in small but deliberate ways. He avoided a car accident on Route 9 by leaving his shop 10 minutes early. He skipped his usual walk down Birch Street the afternoon a water main broke and flooded the entire block. He even placed a modest bet on a boxing match at the barbershop next door, and won. Nothing extravagant, nothing that would attract attention or invite questions. Arthur was careful. He wasn't greedy, he was precise. Just like fixing a watch. Small adjustments, measured moves, the kind of corrections that only a craftsman would appreciate. It was a Tuesday night, just past midnight. Arthur turned on the radio as usual and sat in his chair, notebook open, pencil ready. The static cleared. The announcer's voice came through, but something was different this time. The tone was heavier, more deliberate, as if the man behind the microphone was choosing his words with unusual care. There was no weather report, no local news, no sports results. Instead, the announcer began reading a list of names, a list of casualties. A train derailment on the 6 o'clock express from Hartford, 17 passengers dead. Arthur listened with growing unease as the announcer read name after name. Some he recognized from town, others were strangers. And then, the voice said a name that made Arthur's blood go cold, his own. Arthur Winslow, age 53, watchmaker, Elm Street, among the dead. The broadcast continued. Details about the derailment, the curve where the tracks failed, the speed of the train, the exact time of the accident. 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. Arthur's hands were shaking so badly that his pencil rolled off the notebook and fell to the floor. The radio had never been wrong. Not once. Not about the horse, not about the bakery, not about any of it. Arthur did not go to work the next day. He locked every door in his house, closed every window, drew every curtain. His shop was 3 miles from the nearest train track. There was no reason, No logical reason in the world for him to be anywhere near that 6 o'clock train. He sat in his living room, perfectly still, watching the clock on the mantel. Every tick brought him closer to 6 in the evening. He didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't move from the armchair, just watched the minute hand crawl forward, one agonizing degree at a time. 5:58, 5:59, the second hand swept past 12, 6 o'clock. Arthur held his breath. Silence. 6:01. Nothing happened. He exhaled. A sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. His hands were trembling, but he was alive. He was alive. For the first time in weeks, the radio had been wrong. Arthur sat for a long time in the quiet of his living room. The clock ticked on. 6:15, 6:30. The world outside his window continued as if nothing had happened, because of course nothing had, not to anyone but him. Eventually he stood. He walked to his workbench in the back room. He turned the radio on, not to the midnight frequency, just the regular evening broadcast. He wanted normalcy. He wanted the simple, ordinary sound of a world that made sense. The static cleared. The announcer's voice came through, but it wasn't the evening news. It was the same voice from last night, the same calm, professional tone. And it said, "We apologize for an error in our previous broadcast. The death of Arthur Winslow was not on the 6 o'clock train from Hartford." There was a pause. And then Arthur heard it, the sound of his front door handle, turning, slowly. The radio had never been wrong. It had only corrected the details.